There's firmware, IoT. There's your red team, your blue team. I heard about some dumb thing called black team the other day. I don't think it exists. Purple team, which because people have to then make more things. It's just there's too many things. What's the current language? Is it Python? Oop, that's too slow. Now we got to do Rust. Now you got to do everything else. And see, as a student, as a newcomer, how do you actually stand out if you've learned everything? Let's get this slide actually looking good. Do slideshow, fire it off we go. Okay, that's better. And let's minimize that. Okay, there we go. So, first of all, a little bit about myself. I'm a graduate here from Cal Poly. Been in technology for about 20 years. I got a few gray hairs. Hair is getting a little lighter. And I moved over into security purely probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and got my degree here in cybersecurity and digital forensics. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about emerging threats, emerging tools, strategies to differentiate yourself and thrive in this industry. There we go. Too many buttons. Hit that. Let's hit that. There we go. Okay, so 10 years as an IT director. I got into it with GRC, governance, risk compliance. I was dealing with government. I was dealing with banking. I had learned words like SSAE 16 and SOC 2 and SOC 1 and vendor compliance and a million things like that. I also learned that believing that your life has a purpose is important, and I was enabling foreclosing on people's houses, and I didn't feel great about that. But there's lots of money in that, so there's lots of places in the world you can make money. Do it somewhere where you feel good about it. Okay, so then I moved over. I went here. I got involved in a fashion startup. A billionaire said, I want to be a fashion designer. So he did that. And they just grow super fast. They don't care about policy, procedure. Money just goes like crazy. And so you learn to live in an environment with no budget, which is kind of crazy. Just being able to spend all day long. And if you don't know about this about business, but they like to make money. And so if you can go to the school of business and you can learn things like business accounting, you can learn about business finance, you can learn about like corporate financials and whatnot, you can go way farther in this world than just saying, I'm a coder. And by the way, if you guys haven't checked, go on to ChatGPT, go on to Gemini, crank out some code. It's really fast. Being just a coder isn't a differentiator these days. Knowing how to use your tools and learning how to make things easy and faster is really the differentiator. Okay, so the evolving cybersecurity landscape. Oh, wrong button. There we go. There will be 30 billion IoT devices by 2030, with a predicted 28% annual increase in IoT-based cyber attacks. So have you guys all heard about the routers recently made by TP-Link? That's attacking our critical infrastructure with Salt Typhoon out of China. Yeah, that's IoT. That's home routers. That's your grandma's router. That's your router that is now attacking critical infrastructure. So that's all part of it. Cybercrime damages are expected to hit $10.5 trillion annually by 2025. Interesting thing about that, I was looking into how you calculate damages. Did you know that the ransom payment usually doesn't get calculated in that? That's a damage payment, not a direct cost of business payment. So it's even higher than that if you consider that a lot of people do pay those ransoms. And I'm going to grab my water because I was scratching. But the point I'm getting across is know where the market's going, know what the emerging trends are, know what you're protecting and what you're trying to accomplish in this career. The 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally as of last year. It's a tricky number. I don't know if you guys have looked at the job boards, but it's really tough out there right now. Just to be totally clear, it's a tough market. So officially, there's that many jobs open, but they're not always looking to fill those jobs. It's a statistical thing that works with the government's Department of Unemployment and things like that. And so those numbers are kind of fluff sometimes. So understand that, but know that knowing how to actually protect in cybersecurity is always going to be a good skill. So knowing where your role is. So entry-level positions require at least 3 years of experience. It's a giant catch-22. I think that's being generous. essentially, if you're an electrician, you go in and you become a journeyman. You work towards journeyman. You go through apprenticeships. You go through the union. There's a pathway to where they are welcoming in of juniors. Our industry doesn't have that. They're basically saying you're an IT guy, right? Well, no, I'm a SOC specialist. I'm really good at running in a SOC. Okay, so where do you fit in the IT role? Unless you're going to a really mature company, they don't really have a junior fit. So you have to basically hit the ground running. It's a tough market, but I believe in you guys. You guys can do it. That's what this talk's all about. Um, also, okay, so 85% of enterprises will adopt cloud-first strategies by 2025, making infrastructure as code a critical skill. How many of you guys know about infrastructure as code? So have you guys ever played around with like Terraform and being able to just like stand up a bunch of servers and blow apart the servers and go back and forth really quickly? It's very, very cool, and it's the way we're going. So that's the way things are moving. But there's still plenty of legacy. So traditional skills, your IPv4, TCP/IP stuff, your routing and switching, your entry level Cisco. What's the entry level Cisco cert right now? CCNA used to be it, and then it was CCENT, and they got rid of it. Anyway, routing and switching always going to be popular because everything else just builds on top of that, layers on, and you do more. Okay, so moving on from there. So the evolving threat landscapes is that okay, so ransomware hits really fast. It used to be that I would see I've done years of incident response, and I go into a company that's either in the middle of an incident in the middle of an incident, or they just recently got out of an incident. Now I'm coming in, I'm having to do full forensics on what happened from beginning to end. It used to be that I was seeing 6 months of delay, 4 months of delay, where the attackers were in the network. And there was early entry points at that point, and they were basically learning about the business. Or this is really, really interesting. The attackers go into the business, they figure out their entry point, and then they don't touch it. They don't want to alert you. And then they go on the dark web, and then they sell the access. They're called access brokers. And they say, hey, I don't really have the capabilities of ransoming this whole company, but for the low price of $50,000, I'll give you everything that you need in order to ransom this company. And so then that company buys it 2 months later, and then they go and cause chaos. Nowadays, we're seeing around 4 hours. So attacker goes in the more advanced attacks, and you have to be able to detect that they're in there and prevent catastrophic damage from happening. I just want to be clear that a lot of people with ransomware, especially, they talk about, well, we have good backups. Our backups are protected, so the ransom doesn't actually cause the damage. It does. The attackers are stealing the data. They're reselling it. They're extorting you for the data, and they might also extort you for the decryption. But in the meantime, they are causing long-term issues with losing your customers, with giving you reputational damage, and that is a very long-standing problem, especially if you're in a regulated industry. Like I was recently doing one for a law firm that had a lot of large accounts with major health insurance companies. So that little law firm of maybe 30 people has a major exposure with health insurance companies. Yeah.
Do you still find some companies not using two-factor for everything?
Yeah. What was the original point of entry? Non-two-factor SSL VPN into their network. Lawyers, they had an MSP. The MSP said we were using a Cisco ASA, and we've never seen our Cisco ASA hacked before. So I don't see the problem. And I said, they don't have to hack the ASA. They just have to log in. And then they say, how do they know we have an ASA? And I say, well, they figured out that you have an IP address, and then they figured out what block of IP addresses you have, and then they port scan against it, and then they fingerprint that web portal, the SSL web portal, and they say, oh, that's a Cisco SSL VPN, and they're running at least some version of this range of models of ASA appliances. Let's go ahead and take the Cisco AnyConnect client, and let's go on the black market, on the dark web, and let's see if any of the credentials from this domain just happen to be out there. So you go find a credential that's been leaked that maybe you are using for albertsons.com or something where you're like, it doesn't matter if it gets breached because it's just my grocery store. Well, these people, they reuse their credentials between the grocery store and their corporate environment all the time. So MFA is one of the best things you can do, and companies that don't do it just frankly don't take security seriously. I mean, what do they call it? Table stakes. This is not advanced stuff. This is I'm a CISO. I do fractional CIO work. So I oftentimes will come into companies. I'm like, okay, let's get you mature. I'm a big believer in this thing called CIS 18 or Centers for Internet Security. They have this thing called Cyber Essentials, Cyber Maturity Essentials. Essentially, they have 18 different sets of control families that you're supposed to follow. So asset management, physical asset management, software asset management, software development lifecycle, vulnerability scanning. There's like 18 core principles. And you really need to have at least a base level maturity in each of them. And you can't just have EDR and say, well, we have CrowdStrike. Cool, we're unhackable. No, that's one piece. I was on another breach recently where, by the way, I'm using the word breach because it was an official breach. None of us are lawyers. None of us are allowed to use the word breach unless a lawyer says you can use breach. It's a legal term and it means liability. You don't want to use it. Anyway, so I said, okay, well, step one, do you have a network diagram? No. Okay, well, where is your data held? Well, we have a bunch of servers. Well, which one's there? I just looked on your servers and I see this server over here. What's that? Oh, we're getting rid of that soon. That's server 2003, still in production. Massive holes. And I said, okay, fine. Give me your list of users. And that includes subcontractors. I want to see what user accounts are in your directory, and I want to go against what your HR thinks you have, and then get rid of accounts that should be disabled. It took them 5 days to get me a list of users and contractors. It's a hellscape out there of lack of what's the word, oversight. Okay, so let's move on. I have interesting stuff to say, I swear. Okay, why standing out is critical. We're going to get to you. We talked about kind of the landscape. We got people moving over to the cloud where infrastructure is code. We still have legacy, but you need to be practicing for the future. Know where the future is headed so that you are skilling up to support the future. Legacy, if all you know is legacy, then you're kind of in the past. By the way, from a requirement point of view, what's the difference between a person on the streets, a skilled IT person, and an expert forensic examiner? Nothing. A business card. If you're a hairstylist, you have to have a cosmetology license. If you're a nurse, you have to go have a license with the Board of Nursing. A doctor, every year each of them have to do education requirements every single year. They have to stay current. But a lot of our industry doesn't. You might because you're really smart and you really want to do great, but you aren't required to. So you have a lot of stagnated knowledge. These issues, like you said, with this VPN that's just logged right in. Hey, why is MFA really that important? I'm using Cisco ASA. This thing is good. Well, a little bit of education, you would have learned really quickly that it's not okay. And so we have a lot of IT people that have been IT people since before GW took office, and they haven't skilled up in a long time. Everything they know is based on what they do on a daily basis. They haven't actually gone to training classes. The knowledge is arcane. A lot of them say that they used to work for the CIA. They were one of the early adopters of Novell, and you're like, that's great, that's good for you, but train up.
So in forensics, there are ways to show that you are credible. You can have encase, or you can have access data certs, and you can keep them current. You can be involved with groups like HDCIA.
You can stand out like that on your own, but you're not required to.
So you see people that don't do that stuff
all the time, all day long. And they're oftentimes running major networks of companies that are $500 million company revenues. You would think, how do these people get a job? Well, a lot of times in the modern market, they would not be marketable in the current job market, but they've had their job for 25, 30 years and they're established. And those are the people that are now director levels. our seniors are setting the strategy for the company, and oftentimes there's a lot of ego involved. And so when you have these newcomers like you, who are coming in and saying, "Hey, have you guys ever heard of EDR?" Right? I mean, that's not new, but I mean, it might be new to them, and they say, "Well, I run this. I don't see the problem." EDR is expensive, and so the stuff that comes with Windows is fine. And you're like, actually, and we have a longer discussion. Okay, anyway, why standing out is critical. The goalposts have changed. That's actually exactly the point right there. The goalposts have changed. The old ways are not just good enough. So in demand are things like cloud security specialists, DevSecOps engineer, incident response analyst, IAM analyst, AI and ML security specialists. So when we're talking about things like cloud security specialists, what happened with let's see, what's an easy one? The July Disney breach. You guys remember that one? Just last year? A compromised credential for Slack was happened in Disney. And Disney uses Slack very heavily. One person's credentials got stolen, or a session token. Somehow a bad person logged into Slack. The Disney developers were using Slack very freely to share files and to share all their knowledge, and they had tons of channels. And so the people went in there and they stole the Disney AI model. They stole the upcoming content, and all of that because Slack did not have appropriate security. If they would have been using something like SASE or some sort of cloud security broker, that would have stopped it. Further, being that they didn't detect a large exfiltration of data, just because Slack manages themselves doesn't mean that you don't need to have oversight over it. You guys probably have used firewalls. Firewalls spit out logs. Logs need to go into somewhere where the logs are read, and the right logs need to be configured so you're able to get the logs. No data in means no decision making coming out. So same thing with your SaaS applications, your Salesforce, your Slack, your M365, your M365 email, what's some other common SaaS applications, Box.com, Ignite, etc. Those have to be managed just like you manage your own infrastructure. Because in the end, it's up to you, it's not up to them. So cloud security specialists, how do you configure your AWS environment? How do you secure it? How do you think in terms of cloud first, not just on-prem security? Okay. Hit that button. Start running 2 slideshows. There we go. Okay, not in demand. So these are roles, in my opinion, are on their way out. So your traditional network admin, someone that is updating switches and firewalls all day, that's not going to be the role of the future. That's going to be moving towards infrastructure as code. That's going to be moving towards intent-based networking or software-defined networking. On-prem security specialists, looking over Active Directory, that sort of thing. Compliance only. So there are sectors where pure GRC is there, but really it's starting to become hybrid. I think in the modern like Vanta and automated governance platforms, they're expecting that security is able to do governance over the top of it. But if you're in industries that require a dedicated compliance department like banking, then that will still be there. So certain sectors. And then your general base level IT support, it's all being offshored. It's all becoming desktop as a service. It is not, in my opinion, not the field you want to really be pushing for. Or like firewall admins, having a Sonic wall or an ASA or something that you're managing all by itself. It's all cloud-based these days. If you can think in terms of firewall of bridging the gap between on-prem, cloud, private cloud, and having that sort of unified look at the network, that's the direction it's going. So think in terms of the future. Okay, let's move on. There we go. Okay, so efficiency is key. So it takes an average of 212 days to detect a breach, and that's as of 2 years ago. So we have to use tools and strategies to act faster and more precisely. Efficiency is not optional; it's a necessity. So you need to be learning your KQL. You need to be learning how to actually do proactive threat hunting. You have to be thinking efficiently because it's the executives, they don't like you. You're an expense. You're just the security thing that's eating up budget. So that means that you need to do a lot with a little, and you need to learn how to do it yourself because of the tooling where the enterprise tools that do it all for you are very expensive. And if you can do it using the tools you have, it's much better off. I tell companies all the time, please don't buy more tools, please buy more security staff. Because the security staff will work 10 times over rather than just getting another tool. There's a common thing with security tooling and specifically where it's very common for companies to only use a small percentage of the tooling they actually buy. They might be buying 30 tools that have, let's say, 1,000 features across them. But a lot of them are overlapped and they might only be using 5 or 10% of the whole things. I'm making up some of those numbers, but I think you get the point. Okay, so AI. AI is awesome. Oftentimes, I need to go learn about a new tool that just happened in Microsoft Purview, which is their e-discovery tool. And Microsoft changes their documents like every month, it feels like. Same thing with other companies. And I can dump documents, I can dump knowledge base articles into here and just say, or I can just ask, ChatGPT, what's the procedure for this? And give me a reference. And it just jumps me straight to answer. It's just, I love reading. I'm a big researcher, but time is money, and also time is attackers doing bad things. And you have limited people. Your security teams are not going to be properly staffed. So doing more with less is great. And on top of that, doing that with scripting, coding, proactive threat hunting. Let's say you're working in Microsoft 365 identity access, not going through all those GUIs, but learning how to do it all in PowerShell. ChatGPT can help you, but it's not going to do it without the practice. So you need to do the fundamentals and learn, how does PowerShell work? How does Python work? How can I combine the two of them? How can I maybe for my business build an easy web interface using like a nice little like React library in order to do a little bit of development. Uh, there's a lot of practice that you get so that when you actually do see the code, you read it and then you say, okay, this makes sense to me. This makes sense to me. That's the chunk I need. And you move on with your life. It's very cool. I love our current era. Okay, so productivity tools streamline things like Nessus and Burp for vulnerability assessments. But then from a business point of view, from a productivity point of view, we have things like Notion and Trello. Your business school is going to be great for project management, for productivity management, for managing projects. Is anyone used like Trello boards and Kanban, stuff like that? Oh yeah, I'm running 2 shows, aren't I? There's my leveraging AI tools slide. Move on to maximizing your impact. Okay, so always ask, can I automate this task? It's not just, am I using Trello? Am I using Notion? Am I using my vulnerability tools? But then how can I chain them? How can I then use things like Zapier? How can I use my webhooks and my web APIs in order to say, well, whenever this happens, I always need to do this. So automate it. Build your automations all over the place. And then as you build your automations, document it. So it's not just so you're not building spaghetti string that in 10 years no one knows what you did. Learn documentation and everyone will love you. Promise. You might hate it, but documentation is so great because I hate having to come in and figure out the spaghetti mess of people that don't document. Okay. Emerging cyber threats. There we go. Okay, so deep fakes. We have deep face voice, deep face faces talking. There's live phishing, where you can actually live transcribe your voice. Did you know that phishing was almost non-existent in Iceland until recently? But now that you can do live translation with voice faking emulation, people are now being vished in Iceland very successfully because their guard was so far down because they have one of the least spoken languages in the world. And so there's not very many cyber criminals that speak Icelandic. And so now they're getting attacked too. So those are emerging threats. And we have ways of fixing that. So thinking about the threat model. Who are we protecting? What are we protecting? What are the threats? And thinking about the entire ecosystem, which is that whole unicorn piece. You have to understand the ecosystem, but you don't need to know every piece of it in depth. That's where the teams are, and that's also using your vendors appropriately. Okay, so building your differentiator, finding your niche. So this is where don't be a unicorn comes in. This is the reason why I wrote the slide this way. Um, so specialization is key. So learning the frameworks, NIST, CIS controls, MITRE ATT&CK, that those things are base level. Everyone expects you to know them. They'll establish your credibility. But um, becoming really good at malware analysis or pen testing or cloud security or embedded security, IoT security, becoming really good at something is where I see people having success over and over and over again. Um, if you're okay at lots of things, you need to have a base level. That's what you're doing at Cal Poly right now. That's why you're in this club. That's why you're doing all your research. Is because right now you're building that foundation. That means that when someone uses a word like MITRE ATT&CK, you don't have a deer in the headlights look. You're like, oh yeah, no, I know what that is. And I know that from left to right, that's the flow of the attack all the way through impact. And that's enough to get you through most of it if you're not specializing in. And then you bring in why did we bring this person to the table? So okay. I'm going to flip over to something else real quick. Let's see. Actually, I'm gonna come back to this because I couldn't get the slide um, to work, but I got some really cool stuff by this lady named Track It Pacer on Instagram that I really like following. Okay, so I'm gonna flip back to that, but I'm really gonna harp in on becoming really good at something. It doesn't matter what it is. Becoming really good at something because someone will really find value in it, and being the expert in something means that first of all, someone's going to be searching you out on that thing at some point. I don't know who it is, but someone will. But in order for you to become an expert on that, you're going to have to touch all the things around it. You're going to become pretty good at a whole bunch of stuff as you're becoming an expert on embedded security or something. You're going to learn about how do all the different encryption pieces work, what can be done in hardware, what's true randomized numbers versus a pseudo randomized numbers. I've done a bunch of embedded electronics in addition, and learning how things work at a component level is really cool. Knowing how not being intimidated by a data sheet that's 200 pages long. You're able to be like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. This is the timing diagram, and reading it. That's may not make sense for a CIO to know that, but it's put me where I am today, so I can speak on a lot of topics. Okay, I found a lot of success with professional branding. Um, get yourself a GitHub and take your school projects, stick it on there. Show off what you're doing. If you're learning about something, post it on LinkedIn and say, I'm learning about whatever technology you're learning on. I've been talking a lot. So what's something that you would right now put on LinkedIn and say, I'm learning about this, and you're something you're proud of? Just a couple hands. Who's got something they're learning right now? Interesting. They're enjoying it.
I'm writing a thesis right now on privacy on language learning apps.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. Say that once more.
Privacy in advertising on language learning apps.
Oh wow. That is an emerging tech, very much so right now. That's becoming a hot point. And I bet you there's at least a handful of companies out there that if they happen to see that article, they might say, hey, we just talked about that in our last meeting, and now you're on the radar. So fantastic. Anyone else? Something they're playing with right now and they wouldn't mind sharing publicly.
Been trying to learn Docker, I guess, and just general containerization.
Yeah. Yeah, playing with Docker, and it's cheap, right? You can do it on your own laptop, and you can quickly learn how to build a Docker swarm, set up a couple of Raspberry Pis, or just having a couple of friends and stand up a little load balance server farm or something simple. But hey, containerization, awesome. Anyone else?
I've been on a grant for the last 4 years that involves how do students demonstrate competency that's mapped to the NICE workforce framework or the DoD cyber workforce framework. My niche in that has been, how do you demonstrate your competencies playing in cyber competitions mapped to those frameworks?
Mhm.
And we have done over 40 in-depth interviews with students to understand what is it that how do they get that confidence? How do they get the confidence and the competence from playing in competitions? And how does that transfer into the workforce?
Mhm.
So we've done presentations on this, we're writing a paper on this. But I really want to suggest for students to look for outlets. If you're really passionate about something, find ways to make presentations, find ways to find publications. And if you have any questions about either of those, I'd love to help you.
Absolutely. Make yourself Googleable. Make yourself pop it on LinkedIn. Make it so that when you're at an interview, you can tell a story about this. You're talking about vulnerability management. Well, I was doing this competition in ACL where I was able to scan for vulnerabilities, and I was able to then take advantage of that vulnerability to own the machine. Oh, really? Which vulnerability was it? Now you have a story. You have something to talk about. Your resume is boring. It's one page and it has a bunch of words on it. They've already read it. So you need to become human and have stories. And that's what you're building. You're building stories, professional stories that build credibility. Okay, so that's the meat of the presentation. I want to flip over to something else that really spoke to me on this. But if I plug in my HDMI, will I be able to flip the projector over?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's find out what happens.
And then on one of the buttons above, if you click laptop instead of PC, should show your screen. Wait, there we go.
Okay. Okay, so I like her. She's on Instagram and she speaks very openly about her journey. So she's a network engineer. This is a lady named Track Pacer. She works at Blue Origin as a network engineer. And she's not super deep in her career. She's maybe I don't know, 7 or 8 years into it. So she shares it publicly. And learning what the bits actually are makes a difference. So you guys all all know what IPv4 network is. You know some basic switching and routing, but have you ever thought about what it looks like from the actual Ethernet port? What the difference is between 10 base, 100 base, gigabit, 10 gigabit, what that signaling looks like, how many wires it takes, what will work over a single wire, or 4 wires, or 8 wires? How does PoE work? These are the sort of passionate questions. You talked about the importance of passion that differentiate you. And you might say, how does that translate into security? My answer is, I don't know. But knowing the foundations of how something works means that you're going to make a connection at some point that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So digging in for no good reason other than just being passionate is how you do really cool stuff. So here's a couple of hers. She was sharing a little story. So for instance, there's tape for heat resistance and ESD resistance. You know the difference between a pink bag or a gray bag when you're getting electronics, why they're there, what it means to be a static bag, what it means to have a static mat or a wrist strap, how that actually works. Those are questions that you might have as a technical person, maybe interested in electricity, understanding how this stuff actually operates. Sometimes you break stuff just to understand what's in them. That's okay too. If you guys ever been to an electronics recycling store? I recommend you do. It's really cool. And we live in LA and Orange County. There's like a bunch of big ones around here. We live in a metropolis where there's everything here. And there's big businesses, and you know what big businesses do? They lease and they dispose of their equipment regularly. So there's a regular purge of around 6-year-old equipment just flowing in, and you can buy like 5 or 6-year-old switches for nothing. Enterprise, like a Power Edge. What's the current? I can't think of it. I can't think of the model, but like a 2016 era Power Edge, I mean, the three or $400. And then you have an awesome Proxmox box to virtualize all your servers. There's no reason not to have a home network. And also, even though I talked about cutting edge is built on foundations. So getting into like some enterprise switches from let's say you're playing with some Juniper stuff, some Cisco stuff, a little Brocade fiber networks. Who's ever touched a fiber cable, LC cable, or any sort of networking fiber? I mean, like like getting your hands actually dirty and getting in there, actually understanding how things work. It makes it tactile. Getting out there and meeting professionals out in conferences Who's been to Scale, SoCal Linux Expo? You guys ever seen the big racks that Facebook brings in? It's really cool. They custom build their computers so that they can have entire trays of graphics cards with giant power cables that go between the compute with big backbone connectors that make it all work at crazy high bandwidth with really good cooling. It's really neat. And it makes you actually kind of feel connected to it. Or like for instance, being able to do who's used Snort or heard of Snort, right? It's a yeah, a couple of you. It's basically a way of kind of like doing regex on your network traffic at a high level in order to do intrusion detection. Well, let's say I had a 100 gig link, 100 gigabit per second, bidirectional. Can I run Snort through there in real time? Well, there's ways, but you have to do it in hardware. You can't just do it in software. And they have that sort of stuff on display. And they're more than happy to geek out with you. If you're gonna go into their booth and show interest and say, I'm a nerd too, they will talk to you all day long. They'll love you. So you'll learn everything. These are the best in the industry. Who has ever used a USB to Ethernet card? Right? All of our laptops now all have USB-Cs everywhere, right? There's no network on them anymore. So you use these things here. But you try to do like a packet capture and you're randomly dropping packets. And you don't realize that your little adapter stinks. And it randomly drops packets and you're trying to troubleshoot the network, but it's giving you bad data. The book doesn't tell you that. People say use this adapter, but without actually trying it, you don't realize that these adapters aren't as good as a hardware NIC. So you don't know the difference. And that comes through trial and error. And that's what getting your hands dirty is all about, is learning these things that you don't learn from books, you learn from trying stuff. Knowing what the stuff is, like that she's wearing an ESD smock, electronic static discharge. You know, when I'm walking across this carpet, my finger potentially might have 20 or 30,000 volts on it. And if I reach over and I touch my laptop, is that going to blow up my laptop? Is that going to do something? I don't know. It shouldn't. But here's something that one of my friends who is 40 years Motorola, he's an RF engineer, brilliant guy. He said that it was common in radios, very expensive, high-end police and fire radios, you know, that you would touch it. A technician would be working on the insides, and they'd fire it up, and everything is good. But that thing used to last 15 years, and they now have a failure 6 months in because they weakened some bridge. We use who knows the difference between a TTL logic versus a CMOS logic? The difference is basically the gate. It's everything is built off of N and P junctions in transistors. That's what all our stuff is built off of. And CMOS logic can be very fast. It's what most of our stuff's built out of, but it's very sensitive to static electricity. So good to know. Again, go get yourself like an Arduino and do some kits and learn how like resistors and transistors work, and it'll be better for it. Who's ever used a network testing meter, like a Fluke that will certify a network up to 1 gig or 10 gig or Cat6, thing like that? Oh, you have. Like, did you print out the readout? What did it show? Did you?
I just I was like, I make my own Cat5 tables. Just like test all the end of these messed up.
Okay. Okay. So you're talking about it's not, you're not using a certifier, you're using a continuity tester. It's checking to make sure that your wires are connected correctly. But a certifier, what I found, I was making my own Cat6 connections. And I found it's actually really hard to make an actually fully certified Cat6. The difference between getting like a half twist versus a quarter twist off the end means that your signal, as you're doing a frequency sweep, will, let's say this is 0 hertz, and let's say that is 100 megahertz, which is the range of Cat6. And it might be just fine, but you'll see a significant drop off at like 85 hertz. And that means that your cable might work fine. You're getting good data transfer rates, but it's not Cat6. Doesn't meet spec. If you actually want to do a cable certifier, that's, again, did you know that Cal Poly has most of those tools on campus for you to learn with? We have our various labs over at the science building. They have a bunch of tools. We have our telco room upstairs in the other building. Sorry, I'm not sure where it is these days. It's been a couple of years for me, but all these tools are here. Go play with them. They're very expensive and they're paid for. Um, and there's things like learning how to use an oscilloscope or programmable power supply, and actually building stuff. Who likes drones? You can make an entire career out of drones. Um, and learning that like Cisco will say we only allow Cisco qualified SFP which is that little thing that she's holding there modules to go into our equipment. But it turns out that you could use like a company called was it ST, I think, that costs a tenth of the amount and it'll work. But it'll throw a thing in the log that says this is not officially qualified. And that means that you can now play around with the hardware just fine. Get yourself a 40 gigabit adapter and play with it. Yeah, I mean, like look at this little thing right here. This is a homemade board. You have the capabilities of building your own PCBs and designing stuff. You could probably even ask ChatGPT what components to do and what order. Do we have an equivalent of a makerspace around here? I mean, Cal Poly does. Do we have the place over in over in the library where it has all the equipment and 3D printers and all that? Yeah, like go use it. Very, very cool. Or wondering like, okay, actually this is it.
You mentioned scale. Are there other local conferences you recommend?
Sure. Layer one, really cool. It's in LA. There's Scale. There is OWASP meetings, OWASP Orange County, which is for web application programming and security. There's also one in LA. There's ISACA. There's ISA, and then here we have HTCIA. Anyone been involved in HTCIA? I think we pay for that through past, right? Do we still pay for that HTCIA?
I don't.
Okay, well we could, and that's for getting in with law enforcement and stuff like that. Not to mention that we have a lot of alumni like myself who can make introductions over to Orange County Sheriff and LA County Sheriff, and we can go into like labs and see how this stuff works.
It used to be possible to get a tour of your Orange County forensics lab.
Still is.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you guys ever want, let's do it. We know people. You want to work in government and make a difference. All for it. Not to mention, I've come from the forensics world. That's where I've done a lot of my specialty. And you know what I learned about a lot about forensics in the private space? You don't get to do half the fun stuff that you can do in the government space. It's because in the private space, we have budgets. And they say, that's good enough. That's exactly what I want. You can stop now. That happens a lot. In the public space, you know what they say? Solve the crime. And they just say, spend as many hours as you need to, solve the crime. Oh, you need a new piece of equipment? We'll get you a new piece of equipment. You need to send it out to a specialty shop? Send it out to a specialty shop. And you get to do all the really cool stuff. So FBI, CIA, NSA, which one of the law enforcement branches that actually does their own forensics. A lot of, like, for instance, Long Beach does their own forensics, but Seal Beach doesn't. So Seal Beach ships all of their forensics over to Long Beach, for instance. So
how many RCFLs are there in this area? Orange County would be one, and I'm sure there are.
I'm not sure. I know. Let's see. Orange County Sheriff does. LA County Sheriff does. LA City. LA City Police does. San Bernardino has their own. There's a couple. Most of the small departments all ship it. Yeah, we could definitely make that happen. I mean, again, you guys have a great alumni network. So you want to find someone to start talking to Dr. Manson or talk to myself or talk to one of our alumni, and we all know people. It's not us, it's someone. And then read. I read a lot, and you're going to be reading a lot in this industry. Let me pull this up real quick. Who here has ever pulled open one of these? Give me a second to have it open. Okay, so this is a vendor book. This is written by Unitrends, which is one of the major backup companies. And they write publications on how to do incident response and forensics and all sorts of things. Who goes and reads any sort of vendor stuff? Sometimes it's pretty cool. Like sometimes it's a lot of it, I know a lot of it's marketing. A lot of it's for like marketing fluff. but they write really good stuff too. They spend a lot of money and they pay researchers. And then you have companies like CrowdStrike who puts out their global threat report every year. And yeah, we make our villains look like comic book villains all the time. I really hate it. We really should make them silly names like I don't know, Doo Panda or something. Like make them sound like make them not want to join the gang. So this talks about like where they are where they're seeing new threat actors pop up, what the new trends are, where what regions are it's happening in. They each have their own sort of case studies they go into, themes, but it's all there. If you guys have never read from this company here, Scientia, they are amazing. They're private, but they are funded. Each of their studies is paid for by someone. The information risk insights study is built off of like 25,000 or so incidents. And it's extremely current. It has the actual ransomware costs across the industry, broken down by vertical, broken down by revenue size, types of attack, incident frequencies. It's all in there and it's all explained in a very statistical way. If you're a numbers guy, awesome. Numbers person, awesome. So these vendor tools and information are out there. That's one of the things where like Dr. Manson was saying, did they have MFA? This knowledge is out there. It's not like I feel like one thing I love about this industry is we don't gatekeep around here. We all share constantly. But you share publicly. That way you can say I did it first. But anyway, that's basically the presentation. Dig in deep, learn something deeply. Don't worry about everything, but definitely don't say that the foundation doesn't matter because you got to have that good foundation. Know your networking, IPv4. Does that packet still go around on how to learn subnetting? It was written by one of Dr. Pike's students.
It was, well, I know it was used when I was teaching the infrastructure class.
Best subnetting book ever. It's like 40 pages and it teaches better than everything out there. I share it around even though it's CPP material, but whatever. I mean, the more world that understands subnetting, the better. And supernetting. Most people don't understand supernetting. And IPv6, I still don't totally understand IPv6. Anyway, so we're running real low on lunchtime. You guys are all, I'm encouraging everyone, please go get yourself internships, go get professional experience, do your best to increase your own credibility. And that's kind of what my whole show is dig in deep, become passionate, and don't be afraid of learning too deeply in any particular realm. Yeah.
Two kind of questions on, like you said, how to make yourself like stand out or like learn deeply. How would you like when going to companies or looking for internships? What do you guys like? What actually stands out? Like obviously real time experience stands out. Projects like what would you